You've done some incredible things in your life, but it all kind of has to start somewhere.
We're thinking, why hasn't someone done this before? Are we missing something? Because this seems like an obvious solution to a big problem.
We should absolutely be encouraging businesses to take on the world, but why can't they take on the world from Australia?
We've essentially gone viral because of a virus. We saw our daily sales double one day and then 12x the day after that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another season of People Building Businesses, the podcast by YBF Ventures. We've got some really great guests lined up this season, and I can't wait to talk to them with you. People Building Businesses is all about uncovering the journey and the stories behind the people building some of the most exciting companies around. We try to delve deep into what makes them tick, how they go about building their teams, scaling their businesses, and much more. Our first guest of the season is Nick Frandsen, who's got a really interesting story to tell. We talk about how Nick dropped out of university and eventually found himself as a startup founder, creating Dovetail, which is an innovative tech company that builds solutions for other companies like Afterpay, and which also runs their own portfolio of startups with companies and startups like Marmalade. I hope you like it. And now, Nick Frandsen. Nick, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on here. Before we begin, could you just talk a bit more about your childhood and, maybe let's start with, where'd you grow up?
Great to be here, Jason. I actually grew up in Denmark and moved to New Zealand when I was about 13. Had a pretty normal childhood. I was sort of addicted to surfing and snowboarding. And at some stage, I found out that there was a school in the South Island of New Zealand where snowboarding was part of the school curriculum. So you could actually head up the mountain and go snowboarding as part of school. And I thought this was the best thing in the world. So I convinced my parents to send me there, and that's actually where I ultimately met Ash Vogelberg, who I ended up starting a few companies with, and who was also the co-founder of Dovetail.
That's a pretty big move, going from Denmark to New Zealand on the other side of the globe. Was it a scary experience for you?
No, I loved it. New Zealand was a fantastic place to grow up, and I, so many things to do. I also had at the time, I had a pretty sort of normal childhood of doing sports and fun things, but I had a kind of a weird secret side hobby, which was, I was completely hooked on trading and investing, and I didn't really tell my friends this because it seemed strange. But I would kind of stay up, all night reading books about investing and trading, and my parents had actually set up a trading account for me. So I was waking up at 3 a.m. to check what the markets were doing, and I was just like, I was really hooked on this, but no one kind of really knew. Like, they probably knew I was doing something, but it wasn't something that I shared. And about the same time, I met Ash, and it turned out that he was actually doing something very similar, and also wasn't really open about it. But he was like listed on these US websites for option trading experts that you could contact and pay for advice. And like, he was 16 at the time, and had this it was quite funny. So anyway, we became great friends and started researching the markets together, and we were staying up and writing computer programs to backtest various strategies in the stock market. And I guess that's kind of where I got my first real introduction to programming was through that work.
And how successful was your life as a stock trader as well?
It wasn't very.
But you learned key lessons, and that's important.
Yeah, I sure did. I mean, we were trying to essentially develop algorithms that could trade the markets on our behalf. Ash was studying at the same university, and I had started messing around with some startup ideas. So had he. And at a certain stage, this idea for a new company essentially came up that it was. Do you remember Of course, you remember Groupon.
Yeah.
Groupon was like doing really well in the US, and but there was nothing like it in New Zealand, and we kind of felt like this. It was an obvious gap in the market, like to come in, be the first people in New Zealand to launch this, to do it really well. And we had some innovations on this, because if you remember Groupon, you basically had to like buy a deal of, say, a restaurant or a bar, and then you had to print out the voucher and then take it to the restaurant. And there's a few issues with this. One, we were students, like no one had a printer, and if they did have a printer, they didn't have any ink. And it was also kind of embarrassing, right? Like, who's going to go to a restaurant with like their friends or like with a date, and then at the end of it, you kind of like whip out a voucher? Like, that just didn't really seem.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward, isn't it?
It's super awkward. Like, it's a great deal, but you don't want anyone to know that you're using it. So like but this was also before smartphones really, were a common thing. But we came up with this technology that where you could essentially, you could pre-purchase the deals online, exactly like Groupon, but then they would be stored on the EFTPOS system. So essentially on like a credit card. So all of our customers, we would send them out in the mail these like really cool one-night credit cards. They were like black and purple and looked great, so that you could be out with your friends and you just looks like you're using a normal credit card. There was none of the stigma attached with printing out vouchers, and you didn't need a printer, and it was just like way cooler. So we on the back of that, we wrote a stupidly long business plan and raised some money.
Nice. How long was the business plan? 40 pages?
Oh, it's probably 40, 50 pages. And basically we managed to raise some money, and then, we knew it was a matter of time before there'd be competition. So we just thought, I think actually both Ash and I had one semester to go. Maybe we were so close to graduating, but we were like, let's get out of here. Let's get to work, much to my parents' dismay.
So as, kids studying university at the time, how did you end up raising that capital? Because that seems to be something that's pretty daunting for a lot of people, even, people who've had tons of years of experience.
Yeah, I think I think the important thing was like initially getting a few friends and family involved, and then kind of like leveraging some of those connections and really from there getting introduced to some slightly larger investors. We gave away, in hindsight, we probably gave away slightly too much of our company, considering, if we were to do it again. But that's essentially how we did it. It was also, it was sort of, over 10 years ago. So it was a slightly different market. It wasn't quite as mature, especially in New Zealand. I guess the investors weren't as educated, and, neither were we. But I think it's very much getting your first investor is really, really difficult. And then for every investor you get, it gets easier, right? There's some kind of safety in numbers for investors, and using friends and family and then leveraging those contacts was, I guess, kind of the way we got started.
And did this business plan eventually turn into the company One Night?
Yeah, it did. So we raised this money and, built this, I think really quite cool technology. And it was a really cool brand as well. It kind of resonated in a way that I think Groupon and, those companies didn't. But around about the time we launched, I can't remember, it was like 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, Groupon launched in New Zealand. Grab One, which was a kind of a joint venture between some of the large media companies in New Zealand. They launched as well. And then there was like 3 or 4 medium-sized ones that launched as well, like kind of all at the same time. And it was like just the worst timing ever. And we, you'd go to, like I said, for example, go to a restaurant to try to sell them on this, and they'd be like, yeah, so like Groupon's been here today, Grab One was here yesterday. It's like, okay, this market just went from no competition to extremely hot. And, we weren't sure that New Zealand's quite a small market. Could they support 3 strong competitors. We weren't quite sure of that, like let alone say like 7 or 8. So we actually ended up pivoting very early on in the piece to moving away completely from, I guess, that kind of food and beverage market to focusing on the kind of music industry. And so within about 2 years of that decision, you know, most sort of music events and outdoor festivals, the large ones were all being done by One Night New Zealand, which was like quite a stressful industry, but it was a lot of fun as well. And you know, like most young people in New Zealand that stage probably had like a one night card in their pocket that they were using, because the cards would also store their tickets, and then they could also have prepaid drinks on there. So it was quite an efficient solution, I guess. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What was it like competing with the likes of, you know, behemoths like Groupon and, you know, the company backed by the media companies, as you mentioned? You know, this was your first startup. You know, you dropped out of university to start this company and become a founder. And suddenly, you know, all these competitors, international competitors, are coming into the market. What was that experience like for you?
It was pretty scary. And we just knew that they had so much more money than us. And because of that, they really should be able to beat us at the same game, at just kind of getting out there and building early momentum and market share. You know, we were somewhat worried about this. So essentially we kind of ran from the fight, right? We pivoted it away into a subset of into a slightly different market, which we could use the same technology, but in which those competitors weren't. And we did that really early on. And I think, you know, that entirely became a focus for us. And you know, ultimately we ended up actually selling that company one night to the largest ticketing company in New Zealand called Ticket Direct, which, you know, we really wanted to expand into the US and also Australia. But by this stage, you know, we'd gone through several rounds of investment. And kind of by the time that the company and the founding team and the company was, I guess, ready to go to the US or at least Australia, we didn't quite own enough of the cap table. You know, we didn't own enough of the company anymore for that really to make sense. Because we were going to need to raise more money, and it was going to obviously be a massive endeavor to kind of take this into the US. So in the end, we actually ended up deciding to sell the company. But I mean, we just learned an enormous amount. It was kind of like the MBA, I think, our MBA of just going through that process of one night. And yeah, we learned a lot of different things.
And before we move on from one night, you know, if you could summarize your experience being a founder in one night, you know, what were the 1 or 2 key takeaways or lessons for you that you took away from that experience?
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about starting a company, especially when you're young, is you get to make decisions that you otherwise wouldn't make if you went and joined a company. You'd be protected from making those stupid decisions. But when it's your company and you're 21 years old, you can make them. But we learned a lot of things. I think some of the important things were, especially some of the things that have been relevant for now, is like really picking industries that have favorable economics. So there are some industries that, I think Warren Buffett has a saying about this. You know, it's like when management teams with good reputations meet an industry with bad reputation, it's the industry's reputation that persists. There's some industries where it's incredibly competitive, and it can be sometimes relatively easy to make revenue, but really hard to make profits. The events and ticketing industry was actually a little bit like that. It was incredibly competitive industry, which I think it really forced you to run an incredibly lean company. But it just, I guess it was obvious to us already then that like there were easier industries than this. We hadn't picked a particularly easy one. I think not giving away too much of your company to investors on day one is actually not just investors, but also CoFounders, right? So just making sure that you think carefully about this, because we still see a lot of companies that are sort of 3 or 4 years in, and their cap table is pretty messy and not particularly conducive to them really going on the next stage of growth. And it's often sort of, let's say 2 or 3 years in that the company's really kind of found their niche. They've become good operators and they're ready to scale. But sometimes, if the cap table's broken, that can actually be quite difficult.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. I mean, when founders start a company for the first time, they don't think about the cap table, and they don't think about the implications of giving away X equity to the investor or co-founder and things like that. But it seems like the education around that is changing as well as the ecosystem matures.
Yeah, completely. And especially I think around investors, around co-founders, maybe slightly less so, but co-founders are incredibly expensive if you have a lot of them. At the same time, I think having at least one co-founder is really great. A lot of the companies we work with, and my experience has always been having a co-founder. So I definitely recommend it, but it's expensive from an equity perspective. I guess the last thing that I thought was interesting in the industry that we were in was that industry was an industry where the worst product could win if they were better at the game of business.
Right.
So, for example, in the kind of music industry, the biggest players, for take a company like Ticketmaster or Live Nation, they don't necessarily have the best product, but they're really good at using other ways to kind of build their market share. So, they will essentially buy up large venues, give them a lot of cash up front to secure their ticketing. They're just really good at the commercial game, and through that, they're kind of still winning worldwide right now. So it was kind of an interesting, as a technologist, it really opened your eyes to that. Like, product is super important, but don't put all your eggs in that basket.
Do you think that's true in today's era? Where early on, it was, like you said, possible to have a worse product and be better on the business side because people were really digitizing what were traditionally non-digital or non-product businesses. But now that, a lot of industry's been so saturated by digitalization and tech, do you think there are still areas where, there are industries where businesses thrive just off having a good business and poor product?
I think it's definitely, I guess where we see something relevant to this is we see a lot of startups that are not putting enough focus into sales and marketing of their product. And I think, if you're going up against whatever industry you're choosing, you're probably going up against competitors that are probably better funded and have distribution channels than you. How are you going to steal market share from them in a way that's somewhat, affordable or cost effective? That's actually a really interesting and difficult challenge. And it's probably one I still think a lot of people are not quite paying enough attention to. And when you look at the kind of companies that made it, a lot of them did figure out really interesting or effective ways of selling and marketing their product, in addition to having a good product, but that wasn't the only thing. So I still think, having the best product is an incredibly great thing to have in your arsenal, but it's just not, you shouldn't stop there.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. So, you've sold one night. I'm guessing you were pretty relieved. You and Ash were pretty relieved that you had sold the company. What happened next?
Yeah, so after we sold one night, Ash and I actually both went to Europe. He went to Amsterdam. I moved back to Copenhagen, and we took a little bit of time off just to kind of, regroup. I guess quite quickly we started kind of talking together about what do we do now? what's the next thing? And we started discussing various ideas. We wanted something. We had a few different ideas for kind of product companies, and occasionally we would kind of like explore one of these for a couple of months, and then I'm not sure about that. But we wanted something where we could really something where we could build a long-term company over like say the next 30 years. Like, what kind of company could we build if we really took our time and try to build a company that would outlive us one day? Not a company where it was like going for a 5-year exit, trying to make money quickly and then just retire. It was like, what can we do if we just take our time and can we build a really great company over the long term? Could we build something that we would never get bored of? Because a lot of founders also have this where they get excited in new things all the time. Like, what could we build that would just never get bored of? Could we build something that kind of matched our interests and I guess startups and entrepreneurship and investing? And could we build a company that was like kind of anti-fragile, a company where we could, as much as possible, reduce the role of luck? And I guess if you look at it from like an investment perspective, you'd never just have one stock in your portfolio. It would be seen as incredibly risky. But of course, that's what every single startup founder is doing, and it's kind of what you have to do. But it is a risky proposition, and the flip side of that is that the upside is obviously really large. But we were kind of like looking at were there structures where we could create a more diversified risk profile and really reduce the element of luck. And so I guess this is kind of where we started circling around the idea for Dovetail, which is where we could build a company full of entrepreneurial talent, bringing in a lot of the people we'd worked with in the industry as part of One Night, actually, to kind of build a company that could help other founders build successful startups and also incubate our own startups over time. And we kind of thought that would be a really exciting company to run. It'd be a great diversified business and also be super helpful for the founders, because I think we expect a lot. Expect a lot from founders these days. They have to kind of become experts in fundraising and all these different parts of growing a business. They have to kind of learn, and a lot of the things they only have to learn and then not really use very much again. So if we could kind of create a framework where we could really help these first-time founders by people that had actually kind of done it before, that had experience, that just seemed like a really cool idea. And I guess to actually do that, though, that sounds great at a high level, right? But it's like, how do we actually structure that so that we get the incentives right and so that it's actually possible? And so this kind of became the next thing. There was clearly some things to solve. Like the important thing, obviously, to start with is kind of the alignment problem. Like, how could we really be aligned with the startups that we were working with? And we quite quickly decided that the way to do that was basically to, invest into these startups that we're working with, so that we became, much closer to co-founders, essentially, to these companies. If they did really well, then we did well, and if they didn't do well, then then no one did well. But there was kind of solid alignment there. And the other thing that allowed us to do was to share a large portion of that investment with our whole team in Dovetail.
Right. So everyone in Dovetail has equity in the business.
Everybody in Dovetail has equity in all the companies that we're invested into. So they're not just on a salary. They're actually invested into the companies that we're helping grow. And again, it's like trying to look at all the incentive structures, right? It really aligns our team with the companies that we're trying to build, and it also allows us to attract, I guess, like really great people, which otherwise we probably wouldn't be able to attract, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something very interesting, because not a lot of startups give equity to every single one of their employees. It's usually the top management or whatever it is. Could you explain how you've managed to achieve such a structure where you've rewarded your employees to get the best entrepreneurial talent in your company? If another company or another startup wanted to do something similar, how should they go about approaching it like you have?
I mean, from our perspective, we almost saw this as it wasn't really an option not to do it. We didn't see how we'd be able to attract and grow a large company of the types of people that we needed to. We're talking about people that have been CTOs of startups before, people that have co-founded startups before. Like, why would they join us if they didn't have an equity upside? So it kind of like wasn't really an option whether we did it or not. We knew we had to do it. I guess the difficult part became like, how do we structure it? And there was actually that was actually relatively complex, figuring out just a legal structure and a kind of, I guess, a unit structure where it was kind of fair across the whole company. But, we got there in the end. And I think it's been a huge, important part of us being able to attract, the people that we have, and also kind of getting that alignment with our clients. And then I guess the last thing that also was an important part is obviously we kind of realized that with the team that we were building, with the kind of really premium entrepreneurial talent that we had in our company, we could also help larger companies build new products as essentially as a services company. And that could kind of like bootstrap the company in a way where we could grow the company without needing outside investors into the Dovetail itself, and it would give us a lot of exposure to other industries. If we're working with, let's say, for example, we build a stockbroking platform for a bank, those opportunities allow us to spot new problems that larger companies are facing that otherwise, as a startup founder, they're kind of difficult to come across. It's been I think it's been really exciting. It's an interesting model that we're actually practicing what we preach. We're building and investing and building our own companies, and I think we've been good at actually executing on the model. It's not just the model that's interesting. I mean, like Lehman Brothers and Goldman Sachs, they're both essentially the same model, right? But one's no longer around and one's doing quite well. So I think we've been good at being very picky. We're, sometimes frustratingly picky about the companies we choose to work with, but we've been patient and kind of waiting for the right opportunities and only getting involved when we really have high conviction that this has potential to be a great company, and also that we're the right partner to help do this. And I think that's been a really important part of the, I guess, success.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And the way I understand Dovetail is that you've got Dovetail Studios, which helps companies build products, and you've got Dovetail Ventures, which is that model where Dovetail comes in as essentially a co-founder to the business. How do you split your time between those two areas of the business? Because I imagine that it requires very different levels of leadership and different levels of skills.
Yeah, that's true. So, like you said, the studios is more the services side of the business. Ventures is where we essentially become co-founders with these companies and help them grow and help invest into them. There is some, I guess, crossover and synergy between the two. But there is also a bit of a split. In the very early days, a lot of mine and Ash's time was spent on actually building the services company, which was the kind of, I guess, the engine we needed to like bootstrap this whole operation, right? And then a really interesting and exciting thing that's happened is that now that's kind of starting to go well, is we've been able to invest more and more of our time and the company's resources over into the ventures side, which I think, like, looking long term, that's where the most upside is. It's where I think it's the part that's most exciting about the company, and so that's where we're spending a lot of our time and resources now. And I guess one of the things that's also interesting over in that part is that for example, we're currently raising a fund
Right.
We'll have closed sometime this year. Trying for Q2, will probably be Q3.
Oh, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it will kind of allow us to like really increase the amount even further that we can fund and support these companies, because we can certainly do the earlier rounds, but as they get to series, as they get further up, the rounds become big, and it's a struggle for us to do it with our own capital. So bringing in external capital to really be able to continue to support those companies, I think is an exciting step, and I guess we also think it's quite an exciting proposition that's a little bit different to typical VC.
Yeah.
Most VCs, we're working with these companies on a daily basis for a long time, and so we get to know the companies incredibly well. We get to know how the founders operate, how they deal with challenges, what the challenges are from a commercial, from a technology, from all these different perspectives. So I think we have kind of a real informational edge when we're actually having to make these investment decisions, and that we know the companies incredibly well. I think that's an exciting part of the business that's going to grow soon.
And on the venture side of things, what do you think is the biggest value that Dovetail brings to these founders? You mentioned capital, you mentioned tech, you mentioned expertise. What do you think encapsulates the best value that you bring when a founder wants to partner with you?
So typically, in fact, almost exclusively, we're working with non-technical founders. That's the spot where I think we add just a tremendous amount of value. So like some of the things that we're looking for when we're investing into companies or founders, we're looking for someone that has like deep industry knowledge and experience. So this might be someone that has worked in an industry for 5 or 10 years. They've done well in that industry, and they've just come across a problem that's just obvious to them that this is important and this needs to be solved. But what they don't have is they've never started a technology company before, and then there's a lot about that they don't know.
Yeah.
What they do have is that industry experience. So that's kind of where we come in as this, I guess, kind of like technical co-founder. And I think it's really from an early stage. So you got to remember, we get involved kind of from day one. They will come to us with quite often a relatively high level and not super fleshed out idea, but they know the problem's there. So I think, that will help them already at that stage kind of take that high level vision, that long-term vision, and really peel it back to like, what's its core? What's the smallest thing here that's really unique and different, and that we could be built in 6 months? What's the highest ROI here, and then really help them plan out this kind of pipeline or this timeline of, if this is your end vision, like what? Because often that end vision, it's like a $30 million build and it will take 7 years, right? It's like, what are all the steps that we could take to get there, where there's enough value at each step that it makes sense for a customer? What do the capital requirements look like throughout this process? We'll literally help them plan out fundraising and just kind of, we have partners that are, I guess, different skill sets. So we have partners that have been chief revenue officers in really fast growing companies before. They'll come in and help them talk about like, how do you structure a sales team? How much should you expect to pay for them? And just kind of, so it's really helping them with a lot of advice and setting up their company. Then actually, building that MVP and designing a great first product is, again, something we will do for them. And then I think, and really getting to that point where we have some product market fit and a really good stage. And then we'll actually go through this kind of transfer process where we will help move that technical capability into their own company. So help them build their own team. Sometimes people from our team will even transfer over to their team and become employees of their team.
Right.
So that 18 months down the track, they should have the complete they should essentially have the entire technical team they need to continue this startup. And really, our goal is to help them get there. So I think for a non-technical founder, I think this takes a huge amount of executional risk off the table, and is really valuable.
Thanks, Nick. And that's a good segue to my next question. One of the success stories from Dovetail is, your partnership with Afterpay in the early days of Afterpay. And I'm sure you've told the story a bunch of times before, but for the listeners out there who aren't familiar with the story, could you tell us how Afterpay came to the mix and started working with Dovetail?
Yeah, sure. I got a call from Afterpay when they were still quite small, maybe sort of roughly 30 people, maybe 40. I actually knew one of the really early people in Afterpay, and had studied with her at university. And she knew myself, she knew Ash, she actually knew a bunch of the people in Dovetail. And they was definitely starting to get some traction. But it was really early days for Afterpay. They had no mobile app at all, and they really needed one.
Yeah.
So she called us and said, "Hey, can you come in and chat to us about whether this is something you could help with?" And so we, in really record time, we helped design and build the first Afterpay mobile app for them, and it included some kind of new cool things. It included the ability to use Afterpay in store. So before that, you could only really use Afterpay to make purchases online. But then with the mobile app, you could now also go into stores and just scan the barcode and then buy something in the store, which opened up this new revenue stream for them, which is cool. But I guess we were really happy with the kind of how the product came out, and within 48 hours it shot to the number one of the app store.
Jeez, that's insane.
And it was this is great. It's a great way to start a new working relationship. And then I guess Afterpay kind of kept growing relentlessly, and at a certain point, their kind of, I guess, online platform was starting to feel that pressure of the pretty heavy growth. And so this became kind of a thing that everyone knew needed to be done. It was like, this needs to be solved. How do we solve it? It's obviously always kind of scary to, let's say, re-platform when you're a fast-growing company. You don't really want to stop everything for
you might break
months,
something.
right? Yeah, but you also things are going well, and so you don't want to stop everything for 12 months while you re-platform. It's like the business is like no, another option, please.
Yeah.
So we felt really confident that this was a problem that we could help them solve. We had done some quite high traffic products in the past, either through Dovetail or before people joined Dovetail. So it's like this kind of scalable web platforms was something we actually had a lot of experience in. But I guess the kind of question became how do we really convince Afterpay that we're the right people to help them solve this? And we did have a meeting scheduled with them. I think it was at the end of the week or something, and we're trying to figure out what do we put together? Do we put together a presentation? How do we we know we can nail this for them, but how do we explain that to them? And at a certain point, we're just like, how many hours is there till that meeting? Could we build a proof of concept in that time if we just threw everything behind that? So that's essentially what we did. We stayed up all night for I think it was 72 or 74 hours, and just built this proof of concept for a platform that was built in new technology on a really scalable hosting structure, And kind of importantly, it was built in a way that the switchover could be kind of gradual. So we could swap out some parts at a time that were maybe a little bit problematic, and then do a kind of gradual swap over. But the customers would never notice. We could solve the problem straight away. It was a kind of an elegant, I guess, solution. And we thought we could maybe get this proof of concept ready in time. And we did. And so we walked into, the boardroom 72 hours later. We were so tired. I could barely talk. And then we fired up a kind of TV screen, and we kind of went to this, web platform, which looked exactly like the one they already had, but it was, built on different technology, and it was actually reusing a lot of stuff that they already had, but it was solving a couple of key problems. And sort of much to their credit, they just kind of started laughing, and and we're just shaking their heads, and they're like, all right, well done, guys. I guess you guys are helping us with this. So I guess that's how we kind of got started, helping them with their web platform, and that became that's become the largest. That's the second largest referrer of traffic in Australia, for example. The only website that refers more traffic is Google. So it's just become it's become a phenomenally high traffic site. It's become a shopping destination in itself. And still to this day, we've worked with Afterpay ever since. Obviously they've got their own great team as well, but we kind of work together in a partnership. Development continues basically non-stop around the clock.
Is that how you still pitch to your clients? Do you always stay up late to create MVPs for all your clients going forward?
No, I haven't done that since, but maybe we will again.
And the important question, how many Red Bulls and coffees did you have in that 72-hour period?
So many. It was so unhealthy. We got it done.
Awesome. That's a great story, Nick. So, what do you think is the next Afterpay in your ventures portfolio now? I noticed you've got a couple of interesting companies in there. Could you tell us more about what you're excited about in your ventures portfolio?
Yeah, we've been, I guess, lucky and fortunate, and maybe also had some good discipline with the companies we've been working with. But there's some really exciting things going on there, both commercially, but also in terms of what they're doing. One of the companies that I really love is a company called Provider Choice. So they're in the NDIS space, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. And they basically have built this platform to help people with disabilities in Australia, access funding and budget and spend that funding in a way to really improve their lives. And, we helped them launch this company maybe 18 months ago, and it's just really taking off. And, it's growing, it's doing well commercially. They've just raised a large round at a great valuation. But what's also really exciting about that project, I think, is, some of the emails that come in from parents, often disabilities, it often kind of runs in the family. So, some of the feedback coming in from parents about how this company has really improved their lives and help them cope with disabilities and really help their children live a better life. It's just really cool when you can kind of mix those two of a company that has a great purpose and also is doing well financially and can access the capital markets to scale up growth. I think that's really exciting. And then obviously we do a lot of fintech as well, and fintechs, it's such a big market. If you get it right, all the numbers grow really quickly. I think one of the interesting companies we're working with there is a company called Marmalade. They haven't actually quite launched yet, but they're solving this working capital problem, which so many companies have. A lot of companies will get an order. They'll have to essentially pay to deliver on that order, and then they might not get paid by their customer for 30, 60, sometimes 90 days. And the problem is that the faster and larger that company grows, they're financing all of this growth, this working capital shortcut.
Yep.
And banks are quite conservative in the way that they will lend to companies for this. So we're building this fintech product called Marmalade, which is aimed purely at solving that working capital gap in a way that's different to what's been done before. And I think it's really cool. It's actually still in closed beta. So you've got to, there's actually got to be invited in to be a customer right now. But the customers that are using the platform right now, the numbers that are coming out, the usage metrics are just super exciting. So that's going to go through a public launch some stage this year, and I think that one has a lot of potential. And then there's some other ones. There's actually some that I can't share just yet, but
right.
we're doing some startups in like industries you just wouldn't really expect, like strange niche industries where you just know that there's not heaps of young smart people sitting around working on this problem. Like, this is weird. But some of these industries are massive, billion-dollar industries that have been completely underserved by technology. And we think there's actually a lot of opportunity in that space. And I guess also partly because of the kind of non-technical focus that we have, we get exposure to a lot of really kind of strange industries that are probably outside of the purview of most, I guess, technical founders. So I'm really excited about some of those. And yeah, we should be going public with some of them soon.
That's awesome, Nick. We're actually hosting the Marmalade team here at YBF in a couple of weeks. So we're really looking forward to that. Yeah, Richard and the crew are coming down, which is awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the public launch. It sounds like a great product, and I think you've described it very well in terms of how to know whether an industry is saturated or not. An industry is saturated when you get a lot of young people working at a WeWork on it. So I think that's a great description. Just conscious of time, and I know that we're going to need to wrap up soon. Before we end, I just want to pluck your brain on a couple of pieces of advice that you might pass on to founders listening to the podcast. Sure. Firstly, if anyone's thinking of launching a startup, what advice would you give to budding founders?
Obviously there's so much, but I think two of the main things, I think really investing the time into researching the opportunity up front. It's, everyone gets excited about a new idea. So I do. Everyone does. It's just completely natural. But really spending the time to probably investigate and do due diligence before you write any code, before you go too far down the path where you can't really turn back. And I guess getting investors is kind of the point where it gets really, really hard to turn back. So, that's things like making sure that you talk to potential clients and in a way that you ensure that you get honest feedback. Maybe even try sell them your product or your idea, or kind of, you need to get to a point where you're getting honest feedback from potential customers. You need to really understand the economics of the industry. You need to know of every single company that has that's doing something similar overseas, and the companies that have tried but have failed, and know pretty well why they failed. So just really putting in that research up front, I think is super important, because there's a lot of things that seem like good ideas, but with enough research, you realize that either it isn't, or at least that you need to pivot slightly to be able to actually pull this off. Lastly, something that I touched a little bit on earlier was just this, the importance of really thinking enough about sales and marketing and distribution. There's a lot of companies where if you look at the kind of founder profile, say it's two founders, then there's maybe one that's technical and one that's kind of like a business guy or something, or an industry expert. It's less common to see someone that's really good at sales or marketing, but I think it's really important that companies spend enough time up front really thinking about what is their edge in actually getting this out to the market. And as they start growing, making sure that they hire and budget for the distribution side of the business. Because especially in the early days, once you become a large company, if you have a really great product, it can be kind of easy to distribute it. But when you're tiny, you're going to have to be a little bit creative about how you get your product out there.
Thanks. And finally, my last question for you. You and Ash have seemed to develop this really great co-founder relationship that's resulted in, quite a number of really impressive companies. So for anyone out there looking to find a co-founder, what advice would you have for them?
I attend the same high school. Look, I don't really know. I think when I look at many of the different co-founders that we work with, often they're people that have known each other for a long time or that have worked together in industry. It's a close relationship in that you're starting a business, which is essentially a high stress environment, right? Your finances are intertwined 50-50. It's like a marriage. And you're going to be working, close to every waking hour of your life on this. So it's really important that kind of personal relationship is there, as well as being, having a skill set that kind of complements and having trust in each other. But yeah, to be completely honest, I think most people that I've seen has just been through networks and through either working together or studying together.
Awesome. Nick, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Great to hear your thoughts and get your advice. And if someone wanted to learn more about Dovetail or partner with Dovetail, how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, please just go to our website, dovetailstudios.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Nick Frandsen. Sure you'll find me in there somewhere.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Thanks again for being on the podcast.
Great. Thanks, Jason. And I hope it goes well with Marmalade.
Yeah, no, we're really looking forward to it. We're going to spend maybe a week together. Well, they're going to be here for a week at least. So, really looking forward to it. And if you're ever back in Melbourne, please feel free to drop by and, you're welcome to use our space. And I know you've got an office here as well, but, if you're ever in a city, then come say hi if you need some space.
Fantastic. Well done.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and hope you like the podcast. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud.